There we go. All right, now we are on it. Again, thank you all so much for joining. This is my second time doing this budget virtual town hall. Uh, it's definitely important to me that I continue to keep all of you as community members informed of the many things that we are doing in Albany, and most certainly the advocacy I'm doing on behalf of our community in the state legislature. So again, I thank you all for making time, and we will jump right into it. So uh, just to recap, I know this may be old hat, so to speak, for some of you, but for those that may not be all too familiar, I've only heard bits and pieces. Our state budget process is outlined as depicted in this image. Now, timelines most certainly are what they are. Most certainly, our budget has been delayed or beyond the April 1st deadline since my time being in the legislature, excuse me. But this is the general overview of our budget process. So from June to the fall, our respective state agencies work on preparing the budget for the subsequent fiscal year. And then our division of budget reviews the respective budget propositions from the respective agencies. And then that's from the fall to the winter. Also, during that time, the executive or the governor works on pulling together the executive budget. And then the governor presents to the legislature the budget in January. And then from January till April, we deliberate, come up with our respective one house budget proposals, both for the Senate and the Assembly. And then at the end, our larger budget is finalized. So again, thank you all for most certainly sharing concerns, ideas when it comes to the budget. And we'll keep going. So one of the things I'm most proud of with regards to our state budget, and I always believe in level setting, is that we continue to provide more equitable funding for our schools, K-12 all the way through college. And so this budget, we continued in that trend with respect to making significant investments in our educational system. So we have maintained our commitment to improving foundation aid funding for our schools. This is very vital funding for high needs and underserved school districts, whether they're small, rural, or city schools. Foundation aid is pivotal for our schools, especially in our community here in Senate District 52. And so in this budget, we were able to increase funding to foundation aid by over $100 million for a total of $26 billion. I also want to recall for everyone, and I shared this previously in our last budget, that we in the legislature, along with the governor, put in funds with respect to the Rockefeller Institute in examining our foundation aid formula to make it more equitable, because some of the data points that have been utilized to determine this funding were things such as census data, which was quite old, and the funding formula itself for foundation aid hadn't been updated in several decades. So that's why you're seeing this bump, and also because the needs are great for our schools. So another important investment we made with respect to recruitment and workforce development is we were able to increase aidable salary for BOCES staff for the first time in 30 years. This allows school districts to hire more qualified teachers to meet the increased student demand for important programs. We also were able to, in this budget, fully fund at 100% of our schools free breakfast and lunch for every student in New York. When we did the budget last time, we were only able to get up to around between 93 and 95% of students in New York. In this budget, we were able to get to 100%. And given the very public cuts that have been made to school food programs from the national level, these funds are very critical, especially now for expanding access to universal school meals, which we know is important for our children at every level to make sure they have food to eat, because it most certainly not only impacts academic performance, but also social engagement. We also kept this trend going, not just with K-12, but also with higher education. I am a member of our higher education committee in the Senate and also a proud SUNY alum. But of course, I support all of our colleges and universities. And so this budget, we were able to provide a new initiative called the New York Opportunity Scholarship. This is also known as Free Community College. You may have heard about this in the news. This is a program that is geared towards individuals ages 25 to 55 for high demand career paths to be able to go to community college, earn their degree for free. I was very proud to support this. We also kept our commitment to ensuring support for our respective leadership institutes in the state, including the SUNY Black Leadership Institute, along with the Hispanic and AAPI Leadership Institute. These institutes help with our respective staff and faculty in advancing and moving up in careers in higher education. We also were able to increase funding for the Higher Education Opportunity Program, or HEOP, for a total of $49.9 million. For those students who are interested or in STEM, starting at high school with the STEP program, we were able to increase funding for STEP. And I have participated in this particular program, specifically C-STEP. Most certainly, we were able to increase it to a total of $22.3 million. And we were able to increase the Collegiate Science and Technology Entry Program, C-STEP, for college students. And now that program has around $16.8 million. And of course, the SUNY Educational Opportunity Program, or also known as EOP, we were able to continue to make investments there for a total of $8 million. I am a proud EOP student. This program, C-STEP and others, really helps students from various disadvantaged backgrounds to be successful in college and most certainly beyond. So very happy that we were able to continue these investments and many others in higher education and of course our K-12 schools. So now moving to the next piece, as a former local government official myself, and of course a community organizer, I most certainly understand how our local governments need ongoing support, and the state plays a paramount role with that. And so in this budget, we were able to continue our investments with respect to local government. So I'm going to highlight a few. This is by no means all of them. So a major one is in the area of public protection, specifically our volunteer firefighter program. We were able to invest $25 million of new money towards the volunteer firefighter response equipment, or VFire grants. These funds help our local fire departments make critical capital investments and upgrades. We have a large amount volunteer firefighter units in the district and most certainly across the state. So it's important that we support our respective first responders. In that same vein, we have continued to grow our resources for our EMS or emergency medical service providers. And so we extended the EMS fee for service provisions. Also, with respect to our county governments, we were able to restore $50 million for the County Partnership Grants Program. This helps to support public safety communications and infrastructure projects as well. We also were able to continue our investment as it pertains to cancer research and supports for our New York State Professional Firefighters Association with the investment of $750,000. And in the area of public transportation, we were able to increase our funding for STOA, which is the upstate non-MTA public transportation system, at the amount of $349.4 million. This is a significant increase. STOA funds are the funds that are used to expand and improve most certainly our public transportation system in upstate New York. I will also add, even though you don't see it here, we were also able to continue our record investment from our last budget with respect to AIM funds, also known as aid to municipalities, along with CHIPS funding, which helps with paving our roads, our streets, other important infrastructure needs as well. And then next, in that same vein, we also recognize with respect to economic development, the importance of continuing to support our working families and small businesses, and of course, advancing more resources to expand affordability supports. And so this first bullet is definitely historic because one of the things I heard prior to going into the Senate as a former council member, along with just being involved in the community, especially from our small businesses, the impacts that unemployment insurance, the cost of it and the impact on small businesses. And so in this budget, we were able to allot $8 billion towards clearing the state's unemployment insurance debt. This is a significant investment, especially for our small businesses. We also included a one-time inflation rebate check to New Yorkers for up to $400 for certain earners in unrestricted money. I will also share in our Senate One House budget, we actually expanded on this to provide even more provisions for working families so that these funds could be stretched a lot further. And that's something we are continuing to work on. That is why we also increased the Empire State Child Tax Credit. We also, in this budget, and this is new, established a birth allowance for beginning year, also known as the Baby Benefit Program. This grants new parents a one-time lump sum benefit of $1,800 for public assistance upon the birth of their child. We know that challenges around maternal morbidity and mortality rates continue to grow in our state. We have some of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country. We're actually number 22. And so whatever we can do to provide more supports in maternal care, both post-birth, is very important. And we have a very strong mom caucus in the state legislature that played a pivotal role in this, and also looking at what other states have done in this regard. So very happy that this was included in our final budget. We also know you can't talk about affordability, working families, economic development, and not talk about access to childcare. We know that is critical. And so I continue to advocate along with my colleagues, and we were able to secure an additional $400 million in childcare this year for a total of $2.2 billion statewide to increase access to childcare for our families across the state. And then going to the next piece, Housing. Housing is a major priority of mine and many of my colleagues in the legislature, as well as the governor in the state. And so we continued in our efforts to expand access to affordable housing, whether you are a tenant or a homeowner. So I'm lifting up a few things here, but again, I want to stress that there are other investments that we have made along with these ones I'm lifting up here. So new in the budget, we were able to secure $50 million for the Housing Access Voucher Pilot Program. This program expands access to housing vouchers for individuals and families who are homeless or at the risk of facing homelessness. We know in our region, not exclusively, but in large part, we are struggling with community members that are unhoused. And so this pilot program is designed to help our respective community members who are homeless or at risk of facing homelessness. In addition, we were able to continue funding for the pilot program that was a part of our last budget, and I fought very hard for this as well, and I was glad that we were able to keep this in. The infill housing program, also known as Block by Block. This program is targeting 5 upstate New York cities. They are the city of Binghamton, Syracuse, Albany, Rochester, and Buffalo. These are communities that have some of the highest prevalency rates of poverty in the state and also have some of the oldest infrastructure as it pertains to housing. And so this program provides funding support for the rehabilitation of infrastructure or building of infrastructure with the premise for creating home ownership. We also were able to increase funding for the eviction legal assistance services for a total of $55 million. Also, we continued with the shelter arrears eviction forestallment program, also known as SAFE. This was an initiative we put in last year's budget, and we're able to maintain it in this budget for a total of $10 million. We know that people in our community are falling on hard times, and having support to allow folks to stay in their home because they've fallen on hard times. The shelter arrears eviction forestallment program helps with that. It's not listed here, but the other program we were able to continue to make significant investments in specifically for homeowners is the Home Opportunity Protection Program, also known as HOP. This is a program, and in the budget, we were able to invest $40 million. This is a program that helps homeowners who have also fallen on hard times to help them to be able to get resources to be able to stay in their homes. We also allocated $10 million for land banks. As some of you may or may not be familiar, land banks, land trusts are very important tools with respect to community development, more specifically housing, affordable housing, even more specifically. And then we were able to add an additional $2.6 million to the Restore Housing Opportunities for the Elderly program for a total of $4 million. And to keep going, a large part of our state budget is, in terms of cost, is most certainly education and healthcare, but these are also major areas of investment that we have to continue making along with the other areas that I've talked about so far. And in this budget, we continued to make significant investments in both health and mental health services. So to highlight a few things, we were able to secure $500 million to the Distressed Safety Net Hospital Fund to support key facilities that serve as the sole healthcare providers for a large region. As you all know, in our community, we have some really helpful and resourceful hospitals, but there are also safety net hospitals. So these funds are most certainly going to be critical to support not only the hospitals in our region, but most certainly our safety net hospitals and financially distressed hospitals across the state. We know that our community isn't just urban, it is also rural. And so, and having access to healthcare is paramount, especially when you have limited providers. And so we were able to secure $1 million for the Rural Healthcare Access Development and Rural Health Network Development programs. This next piece touches on mental health services, and this was a significant investment to the Daniels Law pilot program. And I want to give a shout out to my colleague, Senator Summer Brook, who's our mental health chair. I'm also on our mental health and health committees in the Senate. And this is a significant and very needed program that really centers peer-led, community-based responses to the mental health crisis that we are continuing to see across our community, most certainly in the Southern Tier, and of course across the state. As the chair of women's issues in the Senate, continuing to push for expansion of resources for mothers and children. We kept with our investment with respect to maternal health grants, and we added $7 million to that program. We also, in the area of reproductive health care and expanding access here in New York, we added an additional $5 million to support abortion medication for a total of $25 million, along with $4 million for abortion training programs. We also expanded the Reproductive Equity and Freedom Grant Program. And this is one of our newer grant programs that we put in place in the last budget, totaling $26 million. We'll keep going. I also want to mention, I forgot, with respect to maternal health care and technology, as the chair of women's issues, one of the bills that I introduced was a bill to establish a mobile pregnancy app. And you may be wondering, why is that significant? Well, it's important that we have reliable and safe information to help birthing people navigate their birthing journey. And so this pregnancy app has been adopted as a pilot program by the governor for a year. And so I'm pushing for it to become permanent, but that was a significant win, most certainly in the area of maternal health care. Absolutely. So as you all know, New York, or you may not know, New York, we have a very strong farming and agricultural ecosystem. And as a state, we are continuing to invest in farming and agriculture. So to lift up some wins in this area of investment with the budget, we were able to provide $1.2 million for the Farm Viability Institute for a total of $2.2 million. $1 million for the Beginning Farmers Fund. This is for individuals, as the name denotes, who are just beginning in their agricultural journey as farmers. These are funds to help expand access to resources. And we continued funding at $1 million for our socially and economically disadvantaged farmers fund. I will also point out in our community, Cornell University, although it's not listed here, Cornell University is a major agricultural and farming resource, not only for our region, not only for our state, but for our country and beyond. And so we also continue to making investments at Cornell University for their agriculture, the various agriculture programs, to name a few. We'll keep going. We have a couple more here. The environment continues to be a priority, especially when you talk about the heat wave that we are experiencing. All the more reason why it's imperative that we continue to make investments in more sustainable and clean energy, as well as continuing to combat climate change. And so, as denoted here, we continued in this budget to make significant investments to not only protect our environment, but also aid in the state's transition and our community's transition to renewable energy. And so we were able to include $500 million for our Clean Water Infrastructure Fund. I know there are several municipalities in the region who've applied for these funds. They are very critical for projects like water sewer separation and other clean water infrastructure initiatives in our respective communities. We also increased funding for the Environmental Protection Fund for a total of $425 million. We also extended the clean heating fuel credit so that more New Yorkers can power their homes more sustainably and also with much more affordability. We also invested a historic $1 billion in the Sustainable Futures Program to further invest in emissions reductions and renewable energy projects. Utilities. I know this is an issue that is a very, I was going to say hot topic, but it is very true. It is a very large topic. And so this is something I've been very vocal in pushing for more reforms, more accountability, more affordability when it comes to our utilities and how we access them. And so in the budget, we included $25 million in additional funding for the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, also known as HEAP, for a total of $625 million. The Public Utility Law Project, this is an organization that does a lot of work across the state in helping customers navigate their rate cases, also understanding your respective utility bills. And so we were able to provide $2.5 million for that project, and also continued our funding for the Empower Plus and the Homeowner Energy Affordability Program. These are very important programs given some of the federal cuts that have happened, unfortunately, to some of these programs like HEAP and others, but definitely wanted to make sure I lifted that up. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about how we continue as a state to support our veterans. Very, very important. And so a few of the ways, again, these aren't all of the ways that we invested through the budget in supporting our veterans. Here's a few highlights here. So we expanded the veteran annuity payment to include spouses and minor children of veterans who died on active duty. And what this does, it creates an outreach program to make eligible parties aware of the annuity. This is a new expansion, so I was very happy to support this. The budget also included over $8 million for the Joseph P. Dwyer Veteran Peer-to-Peer Services Program. This program has been around for some time, and it is very helpful in supporting our veterans by connecting them with peers and helping them to get access to resources. In the Senate district, Broome County received almost $200,000 through this program, and then Cortland and Tompkins counties received around $100,000 each from this program to support veterans. I also thought it would be good to lift up some even more specific local wins in the budget. So some of those local wins include continuing to support programs that are improving access to food. So most certainly $50,000 for the Broome County Council of Churches, $3.5 million for the Finger Lake, Ontario watershed. Also, we provided some additional financial assistance to Broome County for the amount of $115,000. Continuing our investments in public transportation, this is specific to Cortland County. We allowed the Central New York Regional Transportation Authority, also known as Centro, to receive state transit aid for providing transit services in Cortland County. And that is very paramount for their public transportation system in Cortland County. Some of the organizations that we supported in various ways, The Greater Ithaca Activity Center, I was able to help secure 150,000 for them. Also, FarmNet in Ithaca at $100,000. FarmNet, if you haven't heard of it, I encourage you to look it up. They provide grant services and other resources for our farmers. Workforce development, recruitment, and retention is still a priority of mine. And so I was able to secure $250,000 for workforce funding for our community colleges for TC3 and SUNY Broome. And then continuing to amplify workforce development through our respective chambers of commerce in the district. I was able to secure $150,000 for Broome, Cortland, and Tompkins counties chambers of commerce. Also, I wanted to lift up, which it's not listed here, aid to municipalities or AIM funds. We were able to most certainly maintain funding for that important program that helps our municipalities with program and infrastructure costs. And I wanted to lift up, and you may have heard in the news, and most certainly there's been a lot of proposals and in some cases cuts from the federal level. Part of the deliberations we ensued during this budget definitely took into account some of the things that we were aware of with respect to federal cuts. However, at the same time, we know as a state that we will not be able to backfill all of the proposed cuts if they do go through. And so that's why the budget this year compared to last year was around 235 billion. This year, fiscal year was 256 billion because we're trying to continue making investments. And so I wanted to share this resource. This is a dashboard that allows you to look at the cuts that have been made by congressional district, also by city and state, by DOGE. And so I encourage you to look at this particular map, and you can see, especially for our nonprofit leaders, government leaders, others who are on the Zoom, to see what those cuts look like so far in our state. And we will share that link. I also thought it was important to lift up, I attended a program within the last week that the New York State Office for the Aging held with Actions for Older Persons. And they shared some very important data that I'm sharing here, just to further underscore what's been happening with the federal budget and some of the changes that have been made. So HHS is Health and Human Services. These programs here are a preliminary list of programs that have been eliminated. Programs like the Rural Hospital Flexibility Program, the At-Risk Rural Hospitals Grant, Family Planning, Youth Violence Prevention, TBI, Alzheimer's Research, Mental Health and Substance Abuse Programs, Overdose Prevention Programs, the HIV/AIDS and Ryan White program. These programs have lost their funding. Environmental health programs, also healthcare workforce programs, the National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health, voting access for people with disabilities, and the elimination of DDPCS. Also cuts to food banks, and I know that has most certainly made its way in our local media circuit with regards to cuts to our food banks and the devastating impact that is creating on our community. And anything minority focused or DEI focused, a number of these initiatives have been eliminated through Health and Human Services. The next one is with respect to Medicaid and Social Security. So these are proposals at this point. Um, Social Security has been proposed with respect to being cut and most certainly restructured. Um, During the last couple of weeks of legislative session, both the Senate leadership and Assembly leadership held a press conference with members of the Senate and the Assembly. I was a part of it. Held a press conference urging our federal representatives to not make these cuts. The House put forward their reconciliation bill as part of the Big Beautiful Bill. They proposed, with respect to Medicaid, a cut of $660 billion. And the Senate went even further and proposed a $800 billion cut. And so what that looks like for New York, if these cuts were to go through with respect to Medicaid, it's a total of $13.5 billion. New York State is one of the only states in the country that fully tries to fund Medicaid. And one of the things I often hear from folks is that we're spending too much on healthcare. And the reality is the needs are great. And when you have federal cuts that have happened historically over the years, it then falls on the states to provide access to these important programs. And I think it is most certainly our responsibility, because everyone deserves access to quality and affordable healthcare. It is a right, not a privilege. And so if these cuts were to go through, we would lose around $13.5 billion. There's also a proposal with respect to Medicare. Also, prescription cost increases. These are other concerns. Programs like SNAP have been proposed to be cut by $300 billion. And what that looks like for us in New York would be a loss of $2.1 billion. Also, proposed elimination of Title V older worker program. In the area of housing, Section 8 and 202 senior housing. If this proposal goes through, that would result in a 50% reduction in funding in New York State. All of these cuts that I mentioned and more will have a significant impact on economic security for all of us here in the Southern Tier, most certainly across the state and beyond. Also, the stock market is down. And so these cuts, we are seeing it play out in real time, are having significant impacts on the stock market. Tariffs are most certainly driving up costs of everyday goods, and we're seeing it, whether you're going to the grocery store, or you're at the pump, or even purchasing through various retailers in various industries, most certainly. And of course, inflation will continue to rise and increase cost. So one of the things that we talked about as part of the budget and also our deliberations during session is that we are preparing for the case that if we have to come back in the fall to address some of these shortfalls. And as I said at the top of our conversation, it is not possible for us to, at the state, to backfill all of these cuts. And so we have been trying to the best of our ability, maintain our investments in some of the key areas I mentioned and more. But I thought it was important to share these data points with you, what these impacts look like in real time for us in our community here in the Southern Tier and beyond. And so I would encourage folks who are here at the webinar, who share these concerns, to reach out to your respective members of Congress, whether that is Congressman Josh Riley, most certainly John Mannion, and also Senator Schumer and Gillibrand. Quite frankly, all of our congressional representatives need to hear from you how these cuts will have an impact, whether it's on you directly your neighbor, friends, family, our community overall. And we are actively at the state level trying to do what we can, whether it's in communication with our congressional members, but uh, having voices of our respective constituents also carries a lot of weight. So I wanted to make sure I lifted that up. And so now um, I want to thank you, and we will open for questions. Of course, wanted to make sure you all have my various ways of being contacted, whether it's social media, email, my website, and of course, phone. We do still use landlines, just kidding. We do, but I just wanted to make sure I included that as well. So now we will go to some questions. I know we did ask for folks to submit questions in advance. So we're going to go to a couple of those. And then, of course, please feel free to use the Q&A section of the Zoom, and we'll answer your questions to the best of our ability. So one of the questions that I received in advance is with respect to federal budget cuts and how it will affect New York programs, including Medicaid, SNAP, and school lunches. And so to answer that question, as I mentioned in the presentation, in the budget, we were able to expand access to universal school meals. So all students in New York uh, should have free breakfast and lunch. So we are continuing to monitor what's happening at the federal level, and at the same time continuing to make investments in not only universal school meals, but also with our farming and agricultural community as well. Um, Another question that was raised in advance is pertaining to youth health and mental health. More specifically, the question is what focus funding is on youth health and mental health? One of the things that, I said in the presentation, but also as a member of our health and mental health committees, uh, making and continuing to make investments in these two areas are priorities of ours in the legislature and the governor as well. And most certainly it's imperative that we do, because it impacts you can't go to school, can't go to work if you're sick. And it's important that we provide access. And so some of the things that we were able to do in the budget related to, I'll touch on youth health first. So we in this budget continue to make investments in young people, whether it's from birth or pre-birth all the way until early adulthood. So we included direct assistance to new parents through the one program I mentioned called Baby, but also others. I mentioned $400 million for childcare, but also we invested $12.5 million for youth sports, also $21.6 million for youth development programs, and $40.6 million for youth opportunity programs, and also programs like the Summer Youth Employment Program as well, just to name a few with regards to youth um, health and supports. We also have legislative policies as well that we're doing during the session. Some will co-sponsor on a bill that is pertaining to youth and trying to reduce suicide with respect to young people. That demographic and the statistics around youth who are dying by suicide, those numbers continue to grow. And so through some policies, we're trying to address that along with making investments in youth mental health services. We also included funding for mental health care. Specifically, I talked about the distressed hospitals We also made a long time coming investment for supports for SUNY Upstate, around $400 million for capital improvements there. We know that we refer a number, and a lot of folks from our community go to SUNY Upstate for more specialized care in some instances. I mentioned the $8 million for the Daniels Law peer support community-based response program. And this is a program that is led by trained mental health professionals. The other piece I would lift up with regards to mental health services is that I mentioned some policies. So I supported it passed in the Senate, it didn't pass in the Assembly, to establish a rural health youth suicide task force as well. These are just a few areas. And so thank you for your question with regards to youth health and mental health. I would also want to point out in our area at the Greater Binghamton Hospital Health Center, and others, we've been able to increase beds. By that I mean putting more beds online for that particular facility and others of that nature, with being able to provide all around care. The next question deals with education funding. What funding is there in the budget to support young people, parents, and teachers, school administrators around device-free learning environments? Yes, so this was one of the subjects that came up as part of budget deliberations, cell phone bans. So we, as part of the budget, implemented the bell-to-bell ban with regards to cell phones, with some carve-outs for consideration. We know that there are students who have specialized needs and has information and resources and services on the phone that help with that, along with health professionals. And so we included $13.5 million in the budget to help our school districts with implementing this particular policy, but also schools still have local control with regards to regulating the bell-to-bell ban. Okay, so the next question is with respect to Child Care Assistance Program. The Child Care Assistance Program, which has requirements that are making it hard for small counties to use. So as I mentioned in my comments earlier, childcare is definitely a priority of mine and many of my colleagues. And so we were able to include in the budget $5.579 billion in aid to localities for children and family services, which are all operated by our local departments of social services. And I know that I attended earlier this year a presentation about the creation of a pilot program that the Chamber of Commerce is working on, and the other entities escape me right now, a child care navigator program online to also help. And so, and of course, my office is most certainly available and always will support providers and receivers to help navigate our childcare process. I will also say that in our Senate One House budget, we often go above with regards to what's been proposed on childcare, and I most certainly will continue to advocate for more resources in that way. And if you are finding that still with these investments, additional supports are needed, please don't hesitate to reach out to my office, because I most certainly work with OCFS, Office of Children and Families, and our other state agencies in trying to raise the concerns around issues that people are experiencing, but also best practices that can be taken to scale. So thank you for your question. Our next question um, pertains with older adults, helping them to age in place and having access to financial assistance programs such as Medicaid, SNAP, and HEAP. So one of the other things I'm proud of that we've continued to invest in, this is a program that's administered by the Department of Health, the Nourish New York program, and also the Hunger Prevention and Nutritional Assistance program, or HIPNAP as it's called. And so in this budget, similarly to last budget, we continued making investments. These programs help our respective food banks with providing free meals to older adults in our community, or as my mom would say, seasoned adults. So in this budget, we were able to secure $57.8 million for the HIPNAP program, and then $55 million for Nourish New York, and that comes up to around $113 million. We also know that, and I've been seeing even more cases of our elders with respect to Alzheimer's and dementia. And so in the budget, we were able to provide around $365,000 for Alzheimer's Disease Resource Center, also 3.3 million for the Equal program, which is the Enhancing the Quality of Adult Living program. I mentioned when we were talking about utilities, funding support for the Low Income Home Energy Assistance program as well. I'll also say that in our Senate One House budget, we actually proposed a new program specifically for affordable senior housing that would target upstate communities for senior housing. It didn't make it to the final budget, but that is something definitely still working on. And of course, we were able to get into the budget support for the Elder Ombudsman program, and most certainly continuing in our efforts to prevent elder abuse. Absolutely. The next question is with respect to renovations for rural rental housing. So there are quite a few programs. I'll lift up a couple. And again, I've been very active in advocating for funding for these programs and working with some of our local, what they call CHODOs, or community housing development organizations. Two programs in particular, the Rural Preservation Program and the Neighborhood Preservation Program. These are dollars that go directly to community-based housing development organizations that provide access to affordable housing. And so in the budget, we were able to, for the Rural Preservation Program, to increase funding for that around 8.05 million. And then for the Neighborhood Preservation Program, around $18.8 million for that program. We also continued our investment in the Small Rental Housing Development Initiative, or SRDI, or SRDI program, for $10 million. We also provided funding for manufactured homes to help individuals who have mobile or manufactured homes as well. So that's another area. And so thank you for your question. But again, these are programs. Oh, I forgot to mention the Green Affordable Pre-Electrification Program, and we invested around $2 million for that. Local municipalities, all right. With regards to supports for local municipalities, how does this budget support the Village of Johnson City? Well, I will say that this budget supports a lot of our municipalities, as I mentioned, and Johnson City is one of them. I mentioned the AIM funding specifically. This is aid to municipalities. Johnson City and other towns and villages also receive money through AIM. We also, through programs like CHIPS, help with road pave and repair, that program as well. I know some of our municipalities, especially with antiquated infrastructure like our water supply. So the Water Infrastructure Fund, another resource. I mentioned the $115,000 for financial assistance that we gave to Broome County. We also have given money to the county for veteran services. I mentioned the money to the Council of Churches, along with the housing support programs like Block by Block, like SAFE, like HOP, most certainly in childcare. So Johnson City is most certainly a part of that. Um, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, the influence of our higher education institutions and a lot of the economic development that they drive. I'm not talking about necessarily student housing. I'm talking about overall economic development. So, and Johnson City is definitely doing quite a bit of development. We were able to provide funding through the Office of the Empire State Development for programs like Forward New York, Main Street grants, and Johnson City is definitely a part of that. And of course, if you have even more specific questions around municipal funding outside of the examples I mentioned, please feel free to reach out to my office. And thank you for your question. Um, Also, in the same vein of municipalities, funding for state roads. Yes, I mentioned CHIPS program. So we invested around $100 million for the CHIPS program over the next 2 years, as well as I know in Tompkins County we have quite a few state roads and bridges, and so we were able to invest around $15 million for local road and bridge funding for state bridges and roads, state routes. Thank you for your question. Again, always will continue to advocate for more funding there. With respect to infrastructure. Another great question, what is the state doing on Code Blue funding? So, and why was the allocation to Cortland County not increased? So this is an area that I continue to raise when we talk about our unhoused community and just folks who are on the brink of being unhoused. So in the budget this go around, we were able to maintain funding at last year's levels. Um, which was around $20 million. The last time funding was increased for Code Blue was in fiscal year 24. We're in fiscal year 26. And that was around, when we first increased it, it was in 2024, fiscal year 24, which was 20 million. So it's been held um, at that rate since then. Prior to that, in fiscal year 23, it was only $13 million. So from 2020 till now, it's been a $7 million increase. But I know that the demand for these services are increasing, especially given the amount of inclement weather that we have. Um, I can't speak to why Cortland County specifically, why their allocation was not increased. That is something that most certainly I would need to follow up with OTDA. That's Office of Temporary Disability Assistance, and also our other state agencies to see specifically why those funds haven't been increased for Cortland County. I would have to look and see, I mean, we can follow up afterwards what the amount was before, If there's been no increase whatsoever, or it's been a very small increase and the need has expanded, definitely we'll look into that. And thank you for your question. The next question would like to know about housing resources in the budget, especially for first-time home buyers. Okay, so one of the things that I'll start with what we tried to do in the Senate One House budget and where we ended up in the final budget. So my colleague, shout out to Senator Cooney from Rochester, introduced, I'm a proud co-sponsor, a pilot for a first-time home buyer program, funds for that. It didn't make it to the final budget. However, there are other investments that we have made and continue to make for homeowners. So I mentioned the HOP program, Home Ownership Protection Program. We also continued funding the New York Opportunity Housing Program at around $75 million for homeowners. That is something as well. I mentioned the Housing Access Voucher Pilot Program. This is for individuals or families who are at risk of being homeless or are facing homelessness. That was around 50 million. I mentioned the Neighborhood Preservation Program and Rural Preservation Program. There are also programs like Restore New York. These are programs that are designed to help expand actual housing, whether it's rehabs or new construction, most certainly. I mentioned a little while ago the Small Rental Development Initiative. These are funds specifically around affordable housing outside of New York City, and this is a program that's administered through HCR, which stands for Housing and Community Renewal. I know we use a lot of acronyms in government, so I'm trying to share what the acronyms actually mean. But there are other things that we are doing in that vein. We also were able to include some restrictions on certain real estate investors making bids on homes when they go up for sale. So what we're finding is that some of these real estate firms, investors are buying up homes and essentially putting a monopoly on housing stock. And so what the provision is with this is that the measure will limit. So you have a firm, for example, like Blackstone, they are on track to control over 40% of the housing market by 2030. So this makes it, this provision that we passed will make it more equitable when it comes to putting in some limitations on making bids on properties for the first 90 days that they're on the market to prevent rapid buy-ups ahead of families being able to say, hey, I would like to purchase a home, or I would like to own a home. It tries to level the playing field. It also extends low-income housing credits to support the development and rehab of affordable housing. Thank you for your question. And there are other measures too that we are doing. I am all for, and I know we will try to revisit in our next budget, expanding even more supports for first-time home buyers. I will also share at the local level, some of our municipalities in the Senate District do have first-time home buyer programs. I would definitely encourage you to take a look at those, along with some of our financial institutions as well. Thank you for your question. The next question is the arts. Well, we know arts is a major factor for economic development. But yes, that wasn't the question. I was just adding that on. Okay, so this question is, how is funding for the arts this year? Well, in a nod to my colleague, Senator Serrano, who's definitely very vocal on this, along with myself and other colleagues, we're able to secure funding, very important funding for the arts. Specifically, the New York Council on the Arts received $84 million in this budget, including $20 million for general operating support and $500,000 for stabilization grants to small and mid-sized art organizations. So I'm going to tease this out a little further. So if you are a arts organization, whether you're small or mid-sized, these are grants. I want to emphasize these are grants, not loans, that can help you in your efforts. So I'm thinking about the Broome County Council of the Arts, Tompkins County, Cortland County. There's also funding, a stipend for aspiring artists or current artists. I think the amount is between like 1,000 to 5,000 a stipend, but that's administered also through the New York Council on the Arts. We also continued our investments with respect to some of our theaters, especially in upstate. We know we have some, and most certainly here in the Southern Tier, we have some great theaters, whether it's the State Theater, the Forum. If I name, I don't want to just name a couple, and I just did that, but you all know what they are and what they provide in our communities. So yes, we continued providing funding for theater, for the and other aspects of the arts. Thank you for your question. And again, I know that there are different organizations in our community that provide even more specific programs. So I would encourage you to reach out to our office, and we will definitely connect you, whether it's with the New York Council on the Arts or others that can help in that regard as well. Our next question is relating to impacts, federal cuts and the impacts on local nonprofit funding, especially as it relates to food and housing. Yes, I mentioned this in my comments earlier. As a member of our agriculture committee in the Senate, and also just someone who, again, really trying to make sure we know food access is essential, just like healthcare. And we are most certainly monitoring the federal situation closely. Very much aware of some of the cuts that have happened so far, and also ones that are being proposed. And so, as I said in my comments earlier, that in our deliberations during this budget in this session, we have been preparing for, if the case presents that we have to do a special session to try to address some of these issues. So it is definitely on our radar. Thank you for your questions. Again, if you are trying to connect with some of our local nonprofits, whether it's the Food Bank of the Southern Tier, Council of Churches, CHOW, any others, and Meals on Wheels, most certainly food, some other food supports that folks that you're connected to may not be aware of, or you may not be aware of, please don't hesitate to reach out. We will definitely connect. I also want to, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the United Way, and especially the 411 program. I know they do a number of referrals for community members who are in need of food, and also getting connected to SNAP programs as well. But thank you for your question. With regards to, looks like local government, how tax exempt properties are taking into account for foundation aid calculation. Oh, this is education. So our current foundation aid formula calculates a school district's expected minimum local share using what's called like 4 different models. And so the calculation it uses a calculation that yields lowest local contribution. So all that to say, it's called a foundation aid state sharing ratio, which combines the ratio of the district's local property wealth and adjusted gross income, but also adds in or adjusts for other values as well. One of the things that the Rockefeller Institute and us in the legislature were actually pushing for more of those recommendations to be implemented as part of revising the foundation aid formula. It looks at things like uh, special needs programs and services, poverty index, things of that nature, so that we can most certainly make foundation aid even more equitable, especially for our smaller city and rural schools specifically. One of the things I didn't mention when I was talking about education funding, if folks recall in the last budget deliberation, the proposal by the governor to remove the hold harmless agreement, and this was going to have a significant impact on our smaller city and rural schools with pertaining to funding. That wasn't even a discussion this budget. It was automatically incorporated. So those are some of the ways that we, some of the factors that are taken into account with foundation aid. But again, this is something that we're also continuing to try to most certainly improve. Thank you for your question. Next question. Also in the education vein, wondering if BOCES funds cover special education materials and aid services. So New York State actually gives financial incentive to encourage participation in shared services, which is called like a shared services agreement. Between school districts to help to who may not financially have the means to provide some of these special programs or services. So the state offers BOCES state aid for BOCES services. And so to elaborate further, this is how BOCES state aid actually works. So each district, each school district's board of elections selects BOCES services for the current year. And then in the subsequent year, a portion of the cost of the services through BOCES is returned to the district by the state. Now, the amount that gets returned to each district depends on which services the district buys, and there's a whole formula that's taken into account to determine the district's financial resources. But the money that gets returned to the district is used as revenue. Now, I know that was quite a bit, but to further unpack that a little bit, there are school districts in our Senate district that utilize the shared services program for the reasons I mentioned before. They want to provide specialized services, but they don't have the financial means to do it. And so the shared services agreement with BOCES allows them to do that. That's why in our area, we are so lucky that we actually have BOCES, not just for this reason, but for other important reasons too. Now, special education services from BOCES do not earn BOCES aid for local districts, but local districts do receive something that's called an excess cost aid, which helps to offset some of the costs of special education. There may be some services that a shared services agreement through BOCES it may not cover. For instance, BOCES aid can be used for things like student transportation, things like that. And so what I would encourage you to do, we can have a further conversation about if there's a particular program or in terms of services or materials that you may be looking for your loved one, or you're asking on behalf of a friend, or just you're an educator yourself, um, definitely connect with the office, and we most certainly will connect you with our great leadership at BOCES in our region, across the region, to help navigate what you may be trying to accomplish. And thank you for your question. You know, I try not to get overly technical because it's just like it's a lot of provisions, but definitely will make sure we get you what you are looking for in terms of supports to the best of our ability. Um, Next question. This is pertaining to food access in schools. Um, Asking if the New York State budget will cover the gap if the USDA cuts local food for school and cooperative agreement programs. As I said earlier, we are closely monitoring this. Um, I mentioned that we were able to fully fund universal school meals in this budget. Um, Again, we are prepared to come back to Albany to try to address some of the shortfalls. But again, I do not believe in creating false pretenses or setting unrealistic expectations with regard to, as I said before, being able to backfill every cut that we are aware of and those yet unknown. We will most certainly do our best, like I said, to try to maintain supports for these vital programs because they impact all of us. We all need food. We all need access to quality health care, education, housing. These are all fundamental needs. And so we are definitely paying attention, most certainly, and trying to, and we'll continue to try to explore what we, within our bandwidth, what we'll be able to do. But thank you so much for your question. Um, our next question also related to potential cuts, but in this case with healthcare. In Tompkins County, the options for dentists that take Medicaid are extremely limited, and those that take Medicaid routinely offer substandard care. Is there any way for New York to invest in expanding access to reliable dental care for people on Medicaid? Uh, I will say to you in the Senate, we continue to fight to expand Medicaid coverage, whether it's the Medicaid reimbursement rate, as an example, but more specifically with dental care. Now, back in January of 2024, we were able to expand Medicaid, and my colleagues and I continue to fight, as I said, for higher reimbursement rates and better access to this. We actually did in our Senate One House provide a proposal around dental care. And there's a bill, it's S3566. And unfortunately, the budget money for expanding dental services fell out of the negotiations, but we did pass in the Senate the bill that I just mentioned to ensure that all necessary dental care is covered under Medicaid, including implants and other dental prosthetic appliances, crowns, and root canals. One of the other things, especially as a member of our Senate Higher Education Committee, we are always looking at ways to expand access to providers as well, whether you're on Medicaid or you're utilizing other insurance. And so that is something we are continuing to work on. As the public health side of me, also recognizes that dental care, it is a window into chronic health issues. So I understand how important it is in the continuum of care when it comes to our healthcare system, and most certainly healthcare services and the disparities that exist with dental care and the impacts that it has. So definitely is something that we are continuing to work on. And thank you for your question. Next question. Governor Hochul recently announced plans to build a new nuclear power plant upstate. How will communities be involved in deciding where that plant will be located, and what can we expect going forward? Well, that is a very interesting question. I will say to you that members of the legislature, we found out around the same time as the public. So I will just say to you that this is something that's in progress. I can't answer how our communities will be involved in determining where plants will be located. Um, what the whole plan is, but it is something that I know advocates, colleagues are pushing for more clarity, more comprehensive conversation around what this looks like. I most certainly have concerns because um, we have to make sure that with any type of energy supply that we aren't um, inadvertently creating health issues and also financial um, challenges, that we have to take all those things into most certainly account. And of course, making sure that we are not only protecting health, but also the environment as well. So that is a work in progress. And thank you for your question. Um, Next question. Um, this relates to, it says recently passed bill S2681A and A6452. Is there a sense of when the governor will sign it? So this is a bill that my colleague, Senator Cooney, um, is the sponsor of, to create a uniform policy for paid leave for members of the state police who are directly involved in a critical incident. I will share with you, pardon my coughing, that the governor calls up bills at various times. So I can't tell you when that bill will be called up, but most certainly we'll pay attention to it. I had to take a little drink of water. All right. The other part I'll mention with regards to the governor signing bills, the deadline to call up a bill, sign it, or make amendments or veto, it is December 31st, just to add that as well. Um, Thank you for your question. Next question. Um, this looks like this relates to childcare funding. Um, how will some of these funds be allocated? For example, childcare funds, will there be an opportunity for childcare centers to apply for these funds directly, or will they be allocated to the municipality to decide how funds will be distributed? Excellent question. And my response is it depends on the program. Additional funding for childcare subsidies are often allocated at the county level. Funds allocated through the Child Care Assistance Program, or CCAP. This assists eligible families in covering some or all of the costs associated with childcare by providing a, on average, $300 per week funding support. And families have the flexibility to select from a range of childcare providers. Again, they have to meet the CCAP program requirements. Also, it depends on income levels. Families may be required to contribute a portion of the child care costs through a family share or co-payment. So, like I said, it depends on the program. But as I also said earlier in our conversation, this is something that we are continuing to make investments in with respect to childcare, and always working on ways to expand ensure that more families can afford it. I have heard stories from folks who are re-entering workforce, meaning because they either were on sick leave or transitioning in their careers or trying to maintain their current job, and the childcare costs are so astronomical, and people are working 2 and 3 jobs just to be able to afford childcare, or they can't take the job that they want that would increase their income because they don't have reliable childcare. So all of those things are factors that we continue to take into account as we're trying to and actively working to expand access to childcare programs. Thank you for your question. The next question is around housing, more specifically, unhoused supports. Says the unhoused population has increased dramatically in Cortland County. The only warming center at Grace Church has closed because of lack of funding. Can you please do something? So, as I mentioned, housing is definitely a priority of mine. And one of the things that I try to do through, whether it's through the budget, but also through member allotments that we get, I most certainly try to fund local projects. And so my discretionary funding that I get is for local organizations to apply for small one-time grants for projects, whether it's operational or capital programs. So if you reach out to my office, we can most certainly send the link for that and that source, but also I know in Cortland County, there are several developments that are in the works, affordable housing program, not programs, projects that are in the works. I believe in the city of Homer, a couple of others as well. Some of the developers that are looking to provide support. So definitely even connecting with ongoing developments and other supports along with member discretionary funding to support projects. But again, I know some things are service related. So my office definitely connects folks with various service providers. So again, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll definitely do our best in trying to connect with some supports. I didn't realize that Grace Church had closed. And so if you have any further information or on that, and we can most certainly look into it, we'll definitely see what other opportunities there may be to support. But thank you, of course, for your question and your concern, and we'll definitely do some follow-up. The last question, and thank you all for staying on. Hopefully the weather is cooler, the temperature at this at this time. So the last question, with consideration of the proposed massive federal budget cuts, does the state have any plans to raise additional funds to effectively buffer these raises? I will say that we are looking at all options. We're looking at all options with regards to addressing the proposed shortfall. But again, as I mentioned, sorry, my bag fell. That was the noise. We are most certainly going to see what can be done. But as I said before, not going to be able to fully backfill all of the cuts, because the ones I shared are just some of the proposal. It's not everything. So definitely we will explore and see what we can do. There was one more question that was raised with regards to OASIS funding with relation to housing for older residents. And so the question is around Fairview Recovery, building a new building to support individuals who are struggling with substance use disorder. Um, there were concerns raised by residents about the safety of this, and Oasis hadn't contacted any of the residents in the area regarding their concerns. What can I do to help residents in this area? Well, thank you for your question. This is my first time hearing of this. I will most certainly have to reach out to Oasis, which is our state agency for helping individuals with substance use disorder, and try to get some additional information. And I can do a follow-up via email on what I find out with regards to this particular proposed development. But thank you for your concern um, and for raising your issue. Again, I just want to extend my appreciation for everyone for taking time. My office, I'm out in the community all the time. We're trying to make sure that a lot of issues that you raised tonight, but there may be other questions. Most certainly, please don't hesitate to reach out to the office. I recognize there's a lot of things happening, most certainly policy wise, but also life is often lifing for a number of us all the time. And so I want you to know that we are here to support in the ways that we most certainly can. And again, I appreciate everyone taking time to be here. Please make sure if you have not even just simply questions, if you have ideas. I'm always talking about the great work that we're doing here in the Southern Tier. I don't just talk about it, I brag about it because we have a lot of innovation, a lot of great supports here. And so I'm always looking for ways to augment and lift that up, and most certainly amplifying the need for more support. So, and all support isn't financial, though that is important, but most certainly community building is, and that is free. So, with that being said, thank you for being in community with me and my team tonight. And I look forward to staying connected with everyone. I hope you stay cool and stay safe and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday and have a great rest of your week. Thanks again, everyone.